The essence of what we're talking about is really what are the major strategies, the 5 big strategies that companies are successfully using or should be using to be successful with enterprise AI. And so I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves, and if you don't mind, guys, I'd also like you to answer a question for me, which is, what about AI has surprised you? Either something you expected to happen that didn't, or something that has happened and you didn't expect that. So, Michael, perhaps you could start.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me so much, and thank you to everybody for being here. I'm Michael Gerstenhaber. I'm a VP of Product Management for the API platform at Anthropic, where we develop the Claude family of models. I think one of the most exciting things that, the thing that surprised me over the last year and change that I've been working at Anthropic is that the model intelligence and what people are doing it doesn't express like a linear curve the way that I was sort of expecting, or a smooth curve, I should say, even an exponential one. There are these threshold moments that we've seen after which like code that was generated could actually go to production, or people could use an agent to write code for 45 minutes, or that sort of thing. And it was really these threshold moments that afforded that to engineers that I've seen that surprised me the most.
Yeah. Great. Kambiz.
Yeah, thanks for being here. My name is Kambiz Aghili. I'm Vice President of Product Management at OCI and also in charge of multi-cloud. Really thrilled to be here. One of the surprises for me is just like how AI is pushing everybody to think about data architecture differently. When you look at the infrastructure stack, all the to data stack, to the application stack, it helps bring everything together and challenge us and all the providers in a way that makes the value to the customer having to be readily available in ways that we haven't seen before. So I'm super excited to be on the forefront of it, at the core of it, and working alongside the companies to try to innovate on behalf of the customers.
Great. Naveen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here and attending. My name is Naveen Rao. I was previously the CEO of Mosaic ML, which was acquired by Databricks just under 2 years ago. So at Databricks, I actually head up all the AI products and research teams and stuff like that. So it's been pretty exciting over the last couple of years, seeing how that scales up with the kind of data architectures that are coming together. And one surprising thing for me, I've actually been in this field for a very long time. I'll date myself a little bit, but officially I've been in the field for almost 20 years, and before it was cool. And even before then, in the 90s, I studied what we now call AI. I would say that it was like creative algorithms. And back then, it was like impossible to do things like Go, and that got essentially cracked in 2018 timeframe. So that was kind of an amazing moment. But I think the bigger picture, the thing that's very surprising, is how hard it is to define what intelligence is. It's not a simple problem, and every iteration of technology kind of exposes cracks in the definition that we've come up with. So, and I think we're still experiencing that a little bit. So I think that's something we're going to see more iteration on.
Great. Haridas.
Yeah, I'm Haridas. I'm at SAP, and I work in the Business Data Cloud unit, and I focus on product management, mostly focused on the integrations with ecosystem partners.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So we said there are 5 big strategies. The first of those is to start with a strong data foundation. For those of us that work with enterprise customers every day around this AI topic, inevitably it comes around to this topic of a strong data foundation. And so the question really for the panel is, what are the big challenges around the data foundations, and what are the best answers that we've seen be successful? And Haridas, I'll probably ask you first to address that.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer that by painting a little picture for you. So like when we as vendors, when we go into customers, I get two viewpoints. When I'm talking to the executives, they'll tell you, you need to fit as a node into my beautiful mesh. Yeah? So that's the thinking there. Then you go, there's a beautiful mesh in there, let me go find out what the elements are, and you get down to the leaf level, the guys who are working there, and their answer is, it is beautiful indeed, but it's a beautiful mess, which just about works, right? So don't come and sell me something that'll upset the apple cart, and we quite don't know, but it all hangs together. So that's one perspective. The second thing is something that's probably happening in a lot of accounts. You know, a scenario is, can we get a good updated view of the landed cost? And I'm sure at many customers, given the situation with tariff, that's a question being asked. And the guy who has to do it, if you take the scenario, the boss calls him up, hey, do you have an update on the landed cost? He goes, well, we have best of breed systems, and these systems don't talk to each other. I'll have to update something in SAP, I'll have to update something in another system just to get a view, and it'll take me some time. And the boss turns around and asks, but didn't you know Liberation Day was coming like a month ago? Yeah, so where are you? And then the guy goes, you know, my boss always wants me to read his mind as opposed to give me directions, right? That's the interaction takes place. And then he has to go do it. They do something, they crank out something, and there is a solution, and everybody high-fives, and now they get it. But across these two scenarios, the one question that you need to ask is meaning being derived before truth is established? Yeah? So this truth before meaning is a super important concept as you think about a data foundation. And if you don't focus on that, all the meanings you derive, like in the second scenario highlighted, you may have cranked out something, a solution, where the guy who has implemented it is struggling to figure out whether he's got the truth. So really, one way to look at it is what many organizations are still trying to do with it, is really think in terms of a data product where the data owner is ensuring that the truth is established, and you land a foundational data model of these data products from wherein you use modeling then to go upstream to share with. But you have to establish the truth first, then you can be a bit more confident about the meaning.
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit on that one actually as well. So I think I like that framing because I think that actually is something that a lot of people don't quite or haven't quite grasped, is that the data in your organization, it's not really the fuel of AI. It's actually a set of samples of what your AI maybe should or can do. And it's a way to potentially guide that into ways that can derive insight. But it itself is not insight, right? There has to be something else on top of it. So data is a sampling of some sort of noisy vector of truth within your organization. So actually denoising that, figuring out what's good data, what's bad, how to put it into a form that can actually be consumed by some kind of intelligent system. I think these are the things that people are now learning in the enterprise. Yeah. Before it was like this promise over the last 20 years, hey, I gather all this data, put it down on disk somewhere, and then magically I'll be able to transform my business. That's not really true. There's actually still a fair bit of engineering work left to do.
Yeah. I also think there's a split between like application teams and platform teams here, where the platform team knows what's in their data store, who should have access to it, how it should be formatted. The application teams know what they want from it. But in the world of AI applications, a lot of the time, the application team owns all of the product requirements, and building a framework for teams to work together is difficult and important also.
The one element I would just add to that is that kind of there are a lot of problems when you think about data architecture or kind of data foundation. I will just add 2 data points. One is that if you look at customer workloads, the data store database workloads, 81% is still on-prem. If you look at 80% of customers, they are in multiple different clouds. So what that means is that the data is located across different clouds with different governance and security. It's across different deployment models, and you need a lot of ETL and a whole bunch of stuff. And so from a customer perspective, it's very, very difficult to think about what my data is where and how do I utilize structured, semi-structured, relational, transactional, all kinds of data that I have stored for 30, 40 years. And sort of one problem that customers constantly come to us for is that how can I have, from a foundational level, a centralized intelligent data management control plane where you simplify the security, data governance, observability, and all of that on behalf of a customer. You provide an access point to the data that could be in and across multiple different clouds, seamlessly, natively interoperable with one another, so that AI models, however, wherever you're deploying it, it's going to be really easy to see the entire data state. And the last thing is just co-location of data stores, databases, and applications where AI models are operating to be really next to one another so that you're minimizing the latency and all of that, because you need really fast response time to get to the truth. And so at the architecture level, at the foundation level, those are the problems that we are faced with and solving for.
Says the database guy.
I was actually going to ask a database question, Kambiz, because Google takes the view that probably we're going through the single biggest change in core database technology in 50 years because of AI and the nature of the new application stack. What is your view on how AI is going to impact databases?
It's giving that abstraction layer to abstract the complexity of managing the data, regardless of data types, regardless of data models, regardless of whatever purpose-built data operating model makes sense for that type of data, as well as unifying natively all the operational modernization elements around security, governance, around observability, around giving customers the flexibility of a storage. So for instance, we're working on solutions with you in terms of giving customers different storage choices or different backup options that was never been available. So from a database standpoint, it used to be a company, and these companies were all siloed from one another. Now the AI has really forced all of us to think through what that multi-cloud, cross-cloud interoperability could look like. So that's the biggest innovation that we see in front of us.
Right, right. Okay, the second big theme is around identifying the right business problems and the metrics for measuring those. And I was just wondering, Michael, if you had some thoughts about that, about how customers are focusing on what to apply AI to versus kind of play with the latest toys.
That makes sense. There is a lot of play with the latest toys out there, right? There's a lot of CEOs that are saying AIFI the organization, and it really falls to product managers and engineering managers who know what problems they're trying to solve to articulate that. And it's funny how frequently just basic product management skills fly out the window, right? They want to grope around for what is possible rather than start with a business problem, clearly articulate that, figure out how to evaluate what good looks like, and then back into a solution to a well-known problem. And I think going back to that is actually quite important. Am I trying to transform a business process so that it happens automatically rather than reactively? Do I want to keep many people on the same team? Are we trying to increase productivity? Even starting with high-level goals is very important. But then, like I say, knowing how to evaluate the success of your product, knowing what good looks like so that you can backtest things. You can use online evaluation techniques and observability. You can use offline evaluation techniques to know what you're doing is working and allow you to iterate on that. It's extremely important.
But I think one point was actually embedded in what you were saying is that the way you consume AI is something that's not simple. This is one thing we find over and over again within organizations. We talk about, you look at Klarna when they filed their S1, they said they had all these gains from AI. The key thing is for these customers or these companies that have actually successfully leveraged it is that they figured out what that business process is, how to deliver the insight to whom, when. And that's a product management problem, right? So it's almost like even for internal teams who have to consume this stuff, it's not like, here's a chatbot, go knock yourself out. That never works. In fact, that was kind of V1 of all of this AI stuff, and it all failed. Because a chatbot can be the worst possible interface. Text is a general way to express intent, but it's not a fast or efficient way for all different types of intent. So you need to understand what the intent of the business owner or business process flow person is, figure out how to interject something that accelerates it, and AI is a technology to get you there.
Go ahead.
I'll speak to that. I think another example about the intent. So I give an example of a customer we have, some of our most valuable customers at OCI is Uber, which you all know very well. And so we really work back from the product management in terms of the KPIs, what was most important to their business, and work back from how can we innovate and utilize AI. Give an example. So they're utilize over a dozen different models running on our AI infrastructure. One of the key KPIs they've been really optimized on, that they can now run 14 million predictions per second. What that really means for the business is that they can really guide the drivers based on where they see the demand is coming to be where they need to be more proactively. That means less fuel. That means faster response time, getting the driver to you instead of being 4 or 5 minutes to 7 minutes to be an average of 3 minutes. So those things at those number of transaction scales and predictability per second means so much to the business. So we work back from what it means to the business, how the business can innovate, and get ahead of the competition as the way to really try to figure out where you can fit in AI to help that business particularly?
No, I was just going to offer that the good thing about the curve of the intelligence of the models is that more and more non-chatbot use cases are just like extremely possible, and it just takes the engineering manager and the product manager to think about how to use it. But this is where a process that is driven by a human could bring a human into the loop or remove them from the loop entirely, and that doesn't require a chat interface, right?
Like coding IDEs have really taken off, and I think that's driving a good part of your revenue, right, at Anthropic. And I think this is the reason.
Yes.
That we're nailing the UI.
Yeah, and it's the difference between a tab completion and here, fix this PR and come back to me in 45 minutes whenever it's done, right? And both of those are valid, different times.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll take you back to a more basic story. I used to work with the messaging outfit, and there you're focused on trying to understand churn. So the marketing guys wanted, hey, we need a better churn algorithm. I had a data science team, and they said, hey, Ari, we'll get you a great churn model. So we went and built out a great churn model. The problem was I never asked the question of the marketing guy is, how will you use it, and do you have a way to reach those customers who are on the list of being churned? And so we cranked out the churn model, beautiful, 87% accuracy. And then we went to the marketing. Marketing guy goes, I have no way to wake up that customer on the phone. They signed up without a phone number, so I can't send them an SMS. And those days, this was 8-9 years ago, the push messaging wasn't. So the app has to be woken up in order to get that. So it is important to first understand if you create something, does the other party, can they even use it effectively? So the why aspect before you get to the what and the.
Yeah, very much what we see as well. A good example is Target is a Google Databases customer, and if you're familiar with that search bar in Target where you can look for products, and they had a very specific requirement, which was to get more successful searches, and when that's very clear up front, we need much more successful searches. What are we going to do that? In this case, it's like, well, we need to do some vector searching, and they do that, and they get a sort of a 20% benefit. But there you've got we're targeting something, we're after a particular goal. We know what we're trying to do. We're measuring that goal. We're delivering it. That's typically the thing that we've seen is where it's most successful. So the third area that I wanted to talk about is really about people, and it's about building a culture of experimentation and of learning and investing in talent and skills. Quite often, when we sort of working with customers, the single biggest barrier is that they don't have any AI people. And so they can't really start because they don't know where to start. They don't know what the landscape looks like. They don't know what kinds of tools could be used. And you can't get that until you've actually got this kind of upskilling of the organization. And then once you've done that, trying to kind of roll it out across the organization so that everybody is kind of focused on how can AI help me in my job. So sort of in that context, I was just wondering if Haridas, if you had experience of this and what your thoughts are on upskilling and of culture development around AI.
So I'll take a different tack on that in that some of the basic principles have to be in place in an organization. And what I mean by that is the execution discipline, yeah? And the execution discipline, if I explain, many companies have the notion of these semester plans. You do the semester plan, you properly plan out. And at that point, you have documented what you do. But more importantly, you have to document the who, what, why. Who are you building for, what are you building, and why? That why aspect is very important. So once you have documented, you know what you're doing in the semester plan with some buffer for the incoming from the CEO and incoming from other parties, right? And within that framework, if you now experiment on the AI, because you have documented the why, it becomes very clear why you're doing. I've seen our organization, other organizations sometimes go through, hey, AI is new, everybody's got the project. 2 months before, engineering had no capacity, now engineering has super amount of capacity to try all these experiments, and you wonder how that happens. So that's because you haven't put the discipline of the who, what, why in the semester plan. So if you get that core discipline has to be in place first, to then encourage the experimentation, and then the second part is, yes, you experiment, but it's okay to fail. They got to have that confirmation that try it out, iterate fast, but always define the why are we doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a point on accepting failure also. In a lot of cases, and I'm going to ground this in a customer support customer that we have, that actually allows their customer support agent to go ahead and transact returns between merchants and that merchant's customer. And since money flows, it's actually like a high stakes endeavor. You have to look up policy, you have to apply a policy correctly. A human agent who does this does get it wrong a certain amount of the time. But when a robot agent gets it wrong, the end customer is furious. The merchant can do some calculation. The platform can do some calculation that some % of the time, human gets it wrong, robot gets it wrong, robot is better than human on average. It's definitely better for the end customer. But that doesn't help when you can't return your shoes because a robot said no, right? Yeah. And so in the UX, they make it fail open. They make it so that if there's a failure, it's always transacting the return so that the merchant and the platform eats the cost, but on average, it's actually much better for them and everybody is happy. So thinking through these failure scenarios and what risk looks like to your organization is actually quite important to facilitate this kind of experimentation at low risk.
And to do that, that decision is not made by the engineer or the UI designer. It's a business decision, which requires those business people to have those kinds of trade-offs in their heads, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is also removing the complexity of AI from the end user who is using a product that happens to incorporate AI and bringing that in to the professionals and letting engineers steer the model as much as possible in the application at the client layer before exposing a customer to it. So that customer has to learn very little. They can just get what they want out of the application.
Well, I think this reminds me of I don't know who said it, but it's that culture eats strategy for lunch, right? So it's one of these things, I think getting culture right is obviously not a simple thing to do, but to me, it's actually not a culture of experimentation. It's a culture of discipline on how you test those experiments, but also it's a culture of continuous improvement, right? AI is a way that I can do my job better. That's the way we should think about it for the next couple of years. I mean, at some point that might shift when we get better at it and can actually do full automation, but right now the most successful implementations I see are when some set of people who are doing some set of tasks can improve those tasks by some percentage, right? That is where the impact is coming. That's the way you should think about it today. So really, the culture is, hey, is there a way I can use this tool to make my job easier? Are there places, basically you feed that back into the product manager, right? It goes back to building the right tools, but it has to come from the person who's doing the job, right? If you're not doing the job, you don't know those points of integration.
This is also critical because an attorney has never sat with a Scrum team, but it's extremely useful in legal research. Every legal research company is using AI to aid with legal research, but a change in the sampling, a change in the outputs from the model could be material to the law or it could not be material to the law, and the engineer doing the evaluation often isn't credentialed to know that. And so you have to break down these silos in the organization so that, like you say, the person who you're trying to help is in the room for you and can help evaluate whether or not they're succeeding more.
That, to me, is a good definition of a requirement, but have you seen ways to get that to happen? Because it sounds like quite a hard thing to make those changes in an organization.
It is hard. It's super hard. And I think that's what you just said, getting the right people in the room and getting them to talk to each other. That is the cultural principle of a company, right? I think, we can go into whole organizational principles and things like that, but small teams tend to work very well when you're solving these things. Like something bigger than 10 people, the communication becomes the bottleneck. 5 people sitting in a room who understand different aspects of the problem will solve something, at least to a first order that others won't. And then it can be scaled and put into an organization, that kind of a thing. But I think getting that initial definition right of what you're trying to solve, what success metrics look like, defining all of that up front, I think is really done in a small team, less than 10 people.
Kambiz, are there lessons from Oracle on this issue?
So I think, I think for us, we have been working with DBAs and DBEs for over 40 years, and it's kind of embedding many of the AI and vector database capabilities embedded within the database and providing all the certifications and knowledge base for the DBAs, DBEs, and CIOs to be able to utilize that in terms of embedding into the existing workload has been really, really helpful. So we also have provided a natural language interface to the SQL, which kind of makes the job of these like folks that are in the field and IT folks really, really easier, and they can work at the next level of how they can utilize the data or data architecture in ways that they couldn't do before. From a support perspective, not have to get a call at 4 a.m. in the morning, all the way to what else can they do with the data, how they can have vectorized data readily available to them seamlessly. And so that's been really exciting to the folks we are working with. So we haven't seen a real cultural shift, but we have seen people being more excited about the advent and the availability of such technologies embedded into the knowledge base and tool set that they were already familiar with.
So a related question is really about whether or not AI is going to be democratized. At least the kind of the development of AI systems is going to remain the sort of domain of specialized AI practitioners, or in fact whether other people are going to be able to get into it. And I was wondering, I know Michael, you're probably quite close to this, so perhaps you could kick us off on what you think there.
I mean, the future is it's extremely hard to see, to be honest. But I do believe that with the success of meta prompting, of prompt generation, of code generation, of the AI able to do its own work, to build its own applications, and with the advent of what we're calling vibe coding and all of that, we see it clearly that people can get started without being a professional, without being in the inside, without having 20 years of engineering experience, without a classical CS degree, right? One of my favorite examples is a Google Cloud customer, Replit, and they have a story about a man in India who started coding on his cell phone, and he was able to produce an app with Replit and start selling a product, and through that, buy a laptop and just keep iterating from there, right? And it's just like a wonderful story, and I believe a lot of that will be, like right now, the code going to production for the enterprise is being written by people holding pagers who keep it up, who maintain it, who have, understand DevOps and all of that. But I believe with the intelligence of the model, we're going to go a long way to democratizing that sort of thing.
Yeah. See, it's sort of happening now from a democratized perspective. If you think about the holy grail of text to SQL in the database world, that's already here to be realized, right? People now, the average person can type it in text and get the SQL generated and get the answers. Because for the average person to understand what an outer join, inner join, what do the table structures look like? Impossible. But that is feasible now. So that democratization is already in play. And same for data management people, pipeline people. The tools are embedding data quality people. The tools and the rules are getting embedded through AI right in the workflow where people are. Yeah, where these two. So the key thing I feel is you have to meet the folks where they are. Whether they're in the tools or whether they're in any of the applications, with AI being supportive of their day-to-day workflow.
Yeah. I think to your point, actually, people also, the enterprise especially, needs to decide very carefully when to procure a tool and when to build a tool for this very reason. But, sorry, you were
yeah, I mean, in terms of democratization, I think you got to look at what does that really mean? It means removing blockers. I mean, the economics are one part of it. We saw this actually at Mosaic in 2021. We basically saw that we were going to have this pretty drastic cost reduction year on year, driven somewhat by hardware, but actually more on the algorithmic side, like size of models, how do we make the models behave the right way and all of that. And we estimated it was about 4x year on year. That's been holding up so far. So that's one aspect of friction. The other part of it is really how do I wield it? How do I customize it? How do I make it do the thing I need it to do? And what's interesting, I'm actually a neuroscientist and study reward systems quite a lot in that field. And evolution over the last 4 billion years has actually come up with a pretty nice UI. It's like, how do you train your dog, right? You get them to do the thing, you give them a reward. So I think at some point, we're actually going to start moving towards systems that can learn like that. We start to show them some examples, let them fill in the gaps, get some feedback on how they're doing it, and keep iterating with them. We're already starting to see that. And within Databricks, actually, we built a whole framework for how you can create an agent, see how that agent behaves on some test data, give it feedback. It goes and modifies itself. Tell it want to go faster. It'll go and fine-tune something. It'll go do some re-ranking. It'll do a bunch of stuff on the back end. So it's basically trying to learn what you're asking it to.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be how we start to democratize intelligence. Now, I think there's always going to be a stratification. There'll be people who wield that better than others, just like they're better dog trainers than probably me, right? So I think this is, we are going to see that reduction of friction in these technologies over time.
The other thing that we see is that with every linear increment in intelligence, however you define it, which is, like you say, messy, we see like sort of an exponential difference in the kind of work, the value of the work it can do. So like a lot of the old work that people are getting very good at doing is information retrieval bound, credential bound, stuff like that. And the new stuff does require you to think deeply about what AI is possible of doing and establish new pattern so that other people can see those patterns. And so both kind of problems will continue to exist for the foreseeable future, I think.
Okay. I'm going to move on just to really the fourth of the strategies which enterprises are adopting, which is around ensuring security and privacy. And I suppose the question there really is kind of with, by the way, a lot more kind of requirement for compliance and a lot more sort of legal challenges around these things. What is the implication for the typical organization of AI and how that intersects with security?
I can maybe start on this one, yeah. I mean, this is kind of core to what we do every day at Databricks. We built something called Unity Catalog, which actually is a centralized point for this coordination. And really, I think this was one of the big unlocks. In fact, I presented this as like a Maslow's hierarchy in some other talks where if you don't get this right, you can't get to the other stuff. Like you can't build the UIs, you can't use intelligence because you have to make sure that only certain people who are allowed to see data can actually use AI that acts upon that data. You have to make sure that those things are done in compliance with, GDPR type regulations where data residency and data sovereignty. You have to make sure that there's lineage, there's observability, monitoring. If you don't have these basic pieces in place, all of what we're saying is for naught. It won't happen. And I think that's something that we're just now seeing kind of climb out of the primordial mist, if you will.
I'll tell you a story. I mean, we have a partnership with Databricks, and I was at this event presenting what we have with the data cloud, business data cloud. And this guy comes up to me, Hari, today I'm responsible for the SAP landscape, and we have a data science center of excellence, and they come and ask me for all the data. And then when they have done all the work they have to do with the data, when I go ask for that data back, because I'm responsible for compliance, the data science boys tell me can't even get to it. Yeah, and this is a huge problem. Yeah. So the next time they come around, I tell them, do you understand SOX compliance? Data science guys goes, maybe, maybe not. Well, respectfully, please go away and come back to me. This is the tension in the organization. And what we've done with Databricks is like, can you combine those personas together in one environment where they can collaborate seamlessly, the data analyst, data scientist, data engineer. So that governance has to be in place because today the centers of excellence are different and they just don't understand the data and the semantics, whereas the application guy understands the semantics, the data science guy doesn't quite. He just wants all the data at the fidelity of the row level in a big flat white table.
Yeah. And that's a big part of why we have this partnership between SAP and Databricks is to bring that kind of governance layer for models and data combined with some of the most important data in the world, ERP data and SAP.
Yeah. That governance, kind of unified governance, interoperable, is really key to us as well. And that if you look at the past 40 years, the major enterprises have grown. There've been a lot of M&A that have happened. So line of businesses, they're all very different than one another from a security, from a data governance, from access control. And so when you think about data scientists or any of those personas, they're dealing with all these that are as good as the weakest link on that chain. And so how do you create that control plane? How do you create that governance? How do you create that control plane or whatever that is at that abstraction level that from a data scientist or whoever the developers are at whatever persona, they don't have to think about all the complexities going underneath because it's actually very, very complex and difficult to deal with, right?
Deal with that at a technology level is
it's just really, really hard, really hard.
I think that security is a topic I know we could talk about all day, and I'm going to move us on because we've got other things to talk about as well, if that's okay. And really the fifth of the five areas is around integrating AI into existing systems. And it doesn't work for AI systems to be kind of silos. They need to be part of your overall sort of enterprise fleet. And so I suppose the question there is, what sort of strategies do you see customers using to integrate AI-based systems into the stuff that they've been building for decades?
I mean, I know you just pulled us off of security, but this is like obviously extremely relevant here. The thing that makes a 130-year-old legal research company is the legal research they have done on common law for 130 years, right? The thing that makes a pharma company able to get approval for drugs is access to their proprietary research. So much of the integration is who is allowed to talk to what data, query what data, how two agents might discuss with one another, right? And if they have different levels of credentials and that sort of thing. And then it's also prepping the data for access by the rest of the organization.
I think it turns out that analytical models are still really useful. In fact, I would say most quote-unquote AI compute in the world is probably still in that regime rather than the LLM kind of stuff. I mean, that's probably changing very rapidly. But I think you don't want to throw that away and say, okay, now I have this giant LLM, I'm going to use that to do my analytics. That's a dumb way to do it, right? We have first principles models, based on some sort of, call it physics or whatever you want to call it, of your business, and those are still valid. Now we just need to figure out ways to plug those in the appropriate times. And I think, tool backends, actually we work with Anthropic very closely on this, like how do we plug in all the stuff you've built inside of Databricks or whatever other platform to be able to leverage it, right? You got to build upon. We don't want to replace everything. There's a lot of good stuff that's been built.
I mean, I think that's part of of what's behind the question is that it's easy to think about these AI systems as being greenfield, new systems, but actually a lot of them are going to be ways of enhancing existing things. And I think, Naveen, you were saying earlier about kind of optimization. There's going to be a lot of AI implementation that's really optimizing existing things rather than whole new kinds of things.
Barry, to that point, I can share a story, right? And you used the keyword silo. And it's a story where there is a manufacturer of chocolate and there is a logistics provider. Yeah? The manufacturer is trying to optimize for full truckloads. He doesn't want to send a truck which is half full. Logistics provider is trying to optimize that he doesn't get fined by the retailer because he's 30 minutes late. Yeah? These two guys are working in their own domain, but the data exchange is very difficult because the logistics guy has a very outdated system, whereas these guys are trying to use ML and all try to optimize that full truckload. But without the data from the logistic provider coming into this side, they really can't decide, should I send the truck half full or should I take the fine? Yeah. This is the question you have to resolve. And without the data coming together, any amount of AI done just in the silo here versus silo here isn't going to solve that problem. So it really needs to get that, fundamentally that data foundation has to get sorted out, and then you apply the AI on top.
Just on that data foundation, I think one of the things that's really important to understand is that there is no one large or small language model can solve good for every problem. So part of that for us is to make it easy for customers to think through we've created these interconnect between the different clouds, right? So it's OCI Fast Connect and Google Cloud's interconnect. And so how do you make it easy for customers to be able to utilize our vector database capabilities right alongside Gemini Foundation models and Vertex AI in a way that is built and connected through a direct fiber link and all of that, you don't have to move data. So how do you give customers the choice, depending on the use case, to be able to utilize different models, and that makes sense for them for their metrics, as again, we talked about. So that, to us, syncing, combining, and interoperability across the choices of the models and data architecture is one that we're really committed to.
So I kicked off asking what surprised you in recent months about AI. And just to kind of finish off here, I wanted to get a feel from everyone about what you feel might be happening in the next year or so. So I'm just wondering if people have views about the future, about what's going to happen over the next 12 or 18 months.
Should I start on this? Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that surprised me very recently was the rapid adoption of an open source project that we just started called Model Context Protocol. And a lot of what we're talking about here is, I think, why it got so popular so quickly, right? It pushes access to the data stores and the data preparation to the edge, to the platform teams to expose it to applications. And the fact that it's getting so popular, I think, shows like a very short-term future in which the enterprise is able to start building LLM agents, put them in the field, and distribute the work and the expertise across their organization and access to data across their organization very, very, very successfully. Like I think what we're going to see in this short period of time.
Great. Kambiz.
What I'm really excited about is that how this accelerates cloud migrations. So for us, we invest across every layer of the tech stack, AI. So at the infrastructure level, GPUs and all of that, and we constantly try to launch data centers and regions with a smaller and smaller and smaller footprint because customers want all these services to be available to them anywhere they need it, and they want these to be across the deployment models to be able to connect with one another very seamlessly. At the data level, as the data architecture level, we continue to invest to make sure that interconnect or otherwise syncing the data with one another is really really important. The last thing is at the application level. Either the existing ERP, CRM, all these applications that we have had for like 40 years, how do they utilize AI directly in their operations? But two, how do we bring a dev stack available to customers that is sometimes ours, sometimes is yours, but how do you give that flexibility to the customers to utilize the best dev stack that means for them to modernize their application stack? So when you look at the entire tech stack, super excited about what it enables, how it challenges us to think in different ways, and how it enables customers to look into different avenues to innovate.
Yeah, I think over the next couple of years, we're seeing a big focus on correctness and grounding. I think that's kind of needed to make these agents utilize the intelligence in a way that's actually useful. And so we've now started building things where we can actually make the system self-improve or self-label. Labeling data is super intensive and actually a crappy, noisy process. And I think that was version 1 of the AI world in a sense of like, here's a way to label a whole bunch of data and call that truth. But I think now we can actually start to observe these systems kind of in the wild, how they're being used, and say like where those errors are. And now we have ways of automating, okay, this is actually the error mode that we're seeing. How do I update my system accordingly? Either that you update the model, you update the way you do retrieval, whatever piece of the system. So I think that is what we're going to see the next couple of years. It's going to get pretty good, and to a point where people will start to trust it. It'll start to really start impacting those business workflows. On a longer term basis, I actually do think there's going to be more of a breakthrough. We've gone from this phase of using massive amounts of data, which again are observational points of truth, but we need something that can actually start to build its own source of truth, its own model of what the world looks like and how it works, and use the data as a corroboration or a refutation mechanism. And I think we're going to see an evolution in the next 5-6 years.
Yeah, I'll take a more brass tacks approach. Like every product manager who's focused on a jobs to be done and how he's thinking about it, they'll have to think about how to incorporate AI into that, right? That would be the role of the product manager. And by thinking about it and by thinking about the why, almost everyone will now be focused on meeting the user where they are with the AI they are incorporating into the jobs to be done flow. Yeah, that is at the heart of it. So product managers have to be very, very keen in terms of how will they incorporate this into the frameworks they're using. Yeah, so that, and they have to, it's not just the who and the what, but the why has to be clearly defined if they're going to add AI to one of the jobs to be done for the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I suppose, if I were to pick something, I'd say we'll be sitting here at Next 26, and what we're going to be seeing is a lot more in terms of actual enterprise successes with the technology. And I think we're past that point where people are trying things out, building a chatbot, maybe getting things a bit wrong or whatever it is. And we're at the point now where people are really deploying serious enterprise systems. We're going to start seeing those stats coming out in the next year. I'm looking forward to doing that. So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank the panel for their time and for their expertise. And thank you very much.
Thank you.